Welcome to TGIF.
I love driving.
You do?
Not many people love my driving, but it makes me think back when I learned to drive. And it was like this big, exciting task at hand to learn the rules of the road. And as an early driver, I think I followed them. I think I followed them probably a little bit better than I do now. There's something about getting comfortable in your driving skills that you begin to get a little lazy in following the rules. But we need to remember, the laws of the road are there for us to...
Takes us to the word of the day, which is obey.
That word obey just sounds so like I have to do what someone says. But I mean, think about the laws of the road. They are in place for us to obey. So here we are wrapping up the book of Ecclesiastes, episode 5, chapter 12. And we've talked a lot about obey.
Obey, that is for sure.
And the scripture we have for you is in chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad.
There you have it. That's the whole story, huh? Remember where we started, though? We started meaningless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Solomon's really helping us to understand is that he's pointing us to direction to understand that the only way we can have meaning in life is to truly obey God, to know God. And in this piece of scripture, it's interesting. Chapter 12 takes us on this journey about youth and young, that we should work each day, obviously, to obey God, regardless of your age. But he makes some very poignant points about following God when you're young. And I think it's hard because the young generation, they don't always embrace God the same way as an older generation does. So we're called to remember to obey God, especially when we're young. For when we are young, we have this certain thing. It's called lots of energy, right? When we see our little grandkids, it's like, how do we bottle that energy so that we have that energy and we're not going to bed at 9 o'clock at night? It's how do you bottle that energy and excitement for something? And in this particular case, Solomon's saying that particular something is God. You need that energy and excitement in order to influence, in order to explore, right? When you're young, you're exploring the whole world. Everything's new, everything's big, it's fascinating to you. But as we go older, everything's like, okay, yeah, that happened 10 years ago. Nothing new under the sun, like Solomon is saying here, nothing new under the sun. Everything happens in its time. And so I think that's what he's trying to point us to. And there are many reminders that when in this chapter, that when we grow old, these things happen. And they're kind of, I'm like, oh gosh, how depressing. Right? The stars grow dim. Oh my gosh. The rain clouds darken your sky. Not happy things, not happy thoughts. Legs tremble, shoulders stoop, right? It's like, and the teeth stop grinding, you lose a tooth here, lose a tooth there. These are all things that he's pointing out that as you get older, this is just a reality. And the reality is there's a lot of people that end up in assisted living, in homes that are being cared for, and they can't do as much. Are they any less obeying God or on fire for that? No, but that's just a reality as our bodies age. And so while this feels a little depressing thought, I think it's a good reminder about how to live and encourage younger people to start obeying God at a young age.
It's kind of like the little driving analogy I gave, that excitement of following the rules of the road when you're learning to drive, and then that idea of getting comfortable and maybe lazy. I wonder if we could look at our faith journeys and ask ourselves the same question. Have I gotten lazy when it comes to my excitement for the Lord and my obedience to follow his ways? Talking about our grandkids and that energy that they have and that excitement, how do we still have that now? And I think that's why Solomon's really pointing to the fact of the importance of when you're young, and that you follow and obey God when you're young. And that's really, I mean, isn't that what we taught our kids, or led our kids in that direction through the Bible? And we do the same thing with our grandkids. But Solomon really laying out that whole meaning of life, that without God, there really is no meaning. And I think that's why those very depressing examples just reminds us that it's obeying God is the most important thing in our life when we're young and when we're old. And think about it. We should get wiser as we get older, but I also think we tend to get a little bit lazier with the whole idea of, what am I doing for the Lord with excitement? Am I being obedient to his calling in my life right now, in this season? Am I obedient?
I think we see it too in the life of the church too, that invitation. When you find something out new, you want to invite everybody to it. And as you get older, you get more comfortable and like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. Or, maybe that's not the right time, right person. Rather than that excitement to invite somebody every day to church, that eagerness to invite somebody. And so I think that as you look at how Solomon has laid this out for us, what is obedience? What is the heart of obedience? Obedience is obviously in the Old Testament. He's referring here to the 10 Commandments, right? That 10 Commandments kind of obedience to God. And so we have Jesus now. So what does that mean? Well, now we have Jesus. It's that obedience to walking where Jesus wants to take us. So if Jesus says, I need you to go talk to this person, or I need you to go this way, I need you to do this thing for me, do we have the energy and excitement to do that? And so I think that's why he's saying, becoming a missionary at 80 years old, impossible? Not at all. 90 years old? Not at all, because we've taken people to Guatemala, right, in their 80s. And so that's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is that understanding how much more you really do have over time. It's like when you make an investment and you put money, for lack of a better word, in the stock market or in savings, right? It grows over time with interest and grows and grows and grows and becomes this beautiful thing. At some point, we say those words, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And so you return to the dust, your soul returns to God. And so that's just the flow. That's the natural flow of life. So trying to help the next generation, younger people, is so important. Help them get that eagerness behind an obedience to God. That it's not, oh my gosh, I got to do this.
Right. I was thinking that exact thing. Like, obedience just sounds, like you have to obey. And when we're talking about God, it should be so woven into our lives that we are being obedient to our calling, what God has called us to do, that we're being so obedient that it's just part of our being and not a task at hand. And we are called to invite people to church, to share the gospel message. When we're not doing those things, we are not being obedient to God.
Yeah, this final line is a good reminder, too, that we need to pay a little attention to or comment on here, because it's a good reminder that God knows everything, the good and the bad. You're not keeping some secret of the bad you're doing because you're keeping it under wraps. And this is coming from the wisest of all human men, King Solomon. So that wisdom is there, and it's reminding us that, hey, if you're hiding stuff from God, you need to confess now. And so this confession idea always is important regardless of how old you are.
Definitely wise advice for sure. So the question we leave you with, we have a couple of them. The first one, you might be thinking, oh, I got this one covered. No matter your age, do you know God? You might be sitting there today thinking, I know God. I mean, I've known God for X years. I gave my life to Christ, and you go through all of that. But do you know God? Because if you're truly becoming wiser with age, not the wisdom of the world, and because you read the paper and you watch the news and you're just up on everything, the wisdom of the Lord, you should continue to know God even better. Just think about that this week. Do you know God? Second question, are you living a life of obedience to God? Just what we just talked about. In every season, you're still called to be obedient to God. What does that look like for you? Maybe share that. That's a great thing to talk with somebody about. The last question is more of a reflection. Confession of the bad in your life will heal the soul no matter your age. So I think you could maybe ask yourself, do I really confess the bad in my life? And I know sometimes it's like, well, gosh, I wasn't bad today. I was pretty good today. But if we are not doing exactly what God calls us to do each and every day, then we are falling short. So it's just that vulnerability to remember God knows it all. We've got this book of wisdom that we're concluding, and we're continuing on in another book of wisdom. But I think we had the opportunity to glean a lot from King Solomon. So next week, reading Song of Songs, chapters 1 through 4, as we continue with some more wisdom, and we'll see you next time on TGIF. Bye.